Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Unleashed. I am your host, Kody Houk, and I have an amazing guest with me today. Patrick and I have known each other now for a few months. We got connected through the insurance industry. Real similar in the way we think, our hearts that we really just want to help people do and achieve more and reach their highest potential. And who knows where this conversation is going to go. We're going to talk coaching. We might talk some insurance. We may get into AI and GPTs and living on Mars and who knows what. But Patrick, I'm happy that you're here, man. Welcome to the show. Great to see you again, brother.
Likewise, man. Thank you. It's always a good time hanging out. Feels like every time we connect, so many things happen, and honestly, it's just a blessing to be able to hang out and spend some time with you again. Thanks for having me.
Same here, brother. Same here. Give everybody a little background of Patrick, man. Where'd you start? How'd you get into the insurance industry and now the coaching side of things, man? Let everybody know about you.
So, I always tell people that I went from unpurposed to unfinished. And the fast forward and accelerated version is that I went from major depression, multiple suicide attempts to fractional CEO. And if you don't know what fractional CEO stands for, it just means that you own multiple businesses. And it was never on my radar to be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner. In fact, I'm still waiting to meet somebody that says, I can't wait to get into insurance. I think all of us get there by accident. But I got into the industry because the company I worked for, I was 19 and 20 years old when I was running a video game store, which is like every kid's dream until you realize that it's just retail. But anyway, the company I worked for ended up getting bought out by Blockbuster, and you know how that all ended up. And so I ended up in the insurance, spent 10 years in the commercial auto division for Progressive. I actually implemented things like voice over IP and had about 14 different ideas that were implemented there, and realized that I was just always going to kind of be a frontliner unless I went and got my degree. And so I tried to go back to school multiple times. It just wasn't for me. Spent a small stint in finances, went to USA, worked there for a number of years, and then launched my own agency. Don't get me wrong, I'm thankful for all the skills and the people that I've met in this industry through that, but I just knew that the corporate world wasn't for me, but it took a long time to actually execute, to walk away from that. And here we are 4.5 years later, and now I've got, the insurance agency, I've got a vending machine business, I've got a podcast with a partner, and now we also are into the sports cards, right, which is an old hobby that's also turned into a nice side hustle. And just launched the coaching business.
Awesome, man. Let's talk about Uprise a little bit, man. I'd love for everyone to know what the heart is behind the community and how we're helping people.
Yeah, I think the pillar really comes down to is helping people to really just get the best out of life. Again, like me, was never on the radar initially for me to be able to launch a business, much less have multiple. But what I realized is that with the right mentality, with the right people around me, with taking a leap of faith on myself, as well as trusting, that God was going to provide the right opportunities, that I could go and make something and make life what I wanted it to be, instead of sitting there thinking that I had to rely on others. And so the idea is, it doesn't matter where you're at, that with the right mentor, with the right coach, with maybe even showing you a different path, maybe you'll lean into that. Maybe you're willing to take that leap of faith. And so right now we're helping people within all kinds of different facets, whether it's sales, whether it's kind of career coaching, helping them figure out and nail down what they're about. My first client was actually helping them with her resume, and she just landed her dream job. And what I mean by dream job is that she's a project manager, had worked for all these large companies. And since December, she was basically looking for something. Well, this company came in, opened up a position for her, and said, your only client and your only focus is to work with Google. And that was one of my first clients ever through this. And so the idea is that we can meet people where they're at, we can support them, we can help them. But more importantly, it's that mentality piece to help you figure out who you are, who do you represent, and how do we translate that into basically you getting paid for doing the things you want to do.
I love hearing that, man, and I'll tell you what, I just want to echo that. We can't reach our fullest potential until we know who we are.
1000%, yeah.
And the purpose that God has for us in our life, and understand our strengths and our weaknesses and who God built us to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But you, me, this client of yours that you're talking about, several others that we're connected with, man, like we're living testimonies of that. That when God shows you who you are and you embrace that and start to live it, the doors of life just blow open.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy part really is that nobody teaches us what greatness looks like. Nobody teaches us what success looks like, but even further, it's so hard to sustain being good at something, right? It's hard because you always have somebody who's hungrier, you have somebody who's newer, faster, stronger, right? All those different aspects. And so the idea of being able to find success, to be able to sustain success, and then to be able to copy and paste it to help somebody else with that, right? Those are all different hard elements in their own outright. In each level, right? What they say, every level has a different devil, right? And so when you go through all those different things, like, I didn't wake up and just be like, well, I think I'm done being depressed and I think I'm ready, to go and be somebody else. Like, do you know that facing yourself, having to go through and face your demons, like, do you know how hard it was to tell somebody, like, yeah, I tried to kill myself? Like, that's a permanent stain that I have to walk around with, that people, they're like, well, it's so inspirational that you talk about that. And I'm like, do you know how long it took to be able to actually share that? Because I knew that there was judgment, that people were going to turn around and be like, ooh, he's got the suicide tendencies. Like, it was like people were coming at me, judgment. But then when you also kind of realize, like, look, most of the judgment's coming from myself.
Yeah.
And to be able to overcome that, it's like night and day difference, but it takes a long time to get there.
Yeah. Same here, man. You've heard my story a little bit. I'm going to tell it more and more into the future because I did everything I could. And it was so weird, the transition in life that I've made, right? Like, God gave me that story to go help people that were in the same place I was
100%.
before, addicted, a thief, a liar, a cheater. I mean, you name it, I was it through my late teens, early 20s, and even even into my late 20s. And when he saved me from that, I lived that boldly every day. Like, this was my story. This was who I was. Right. But it's been something of a struggle for me, that as God's elevated me into, I don't know what the right word to use for it is, right? But elevated me into different circles of success, right? Different levels of people that he's put me around. There's been times I've struggled with feeling that was something I needed to hide. I need to talk about business Kody, not old drug addict mess of Kody.
Yeah.
Right. But what's been coming to light recently is the more I've been opening up with that in the circles that I'm in now, it's just giving me bigger and bigger stages to share that story and the opportunity to help more people. Right. Because we share that, and you said it best, man. We're our harshest critics. We're judging ourselves on those harder than anyone else.
Right.
We share that story with someone else and they celebrate it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I always like to reference that movie 8 Mile with Eminem. The last battle scene, right? When he's going through and his friend Cheddar Bob says, man, aren't you afraid that they're going to talk about all these things about you? About how they, like, they beat you up and they did all that stuff to your girl. Like, aren't you afraid of all that? And like, for most people, that's where we're at, right? Most of us, like we put that on ourselves. But at the end of the movie, what did he do? He flipped the script. He talked about all those things, right? And then the guy had nothing else to go off of because he literally put it all out there. And what I tell people all the time is that when you share your story, it's authentic. I promise you, you're not going to like the other version that other people tell about you. So you might as well jump ahead and be the one to share that.
Yeah, 100%, man. I love that. And, you know, there was a time in life when I kind of, you know, people would come at me with some of that. A lot of people that I was connected with before in that old life would come at me with some of that stuff. And it was kind of one of those things. It's like, you know what, man, like, go ahead and say whatever you want, because there's nothing that you can think about me that's worse than what I think about me.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and we're always going to be a villain to somebody, right? And people are always going to judge us how they knew us. So, you know, a lot of our old circles, they knew us when we were doing stupid stuff as kids. You know, our parents always kind of remember, you know, the worst of things. But, you know, sometimes they come around and acknowledge some of the good things that we're doing. But for the most part, you know, everyone remembers you and judges you how they remember you. And so, again, you know, for us to really evolve and showcase that change, it's not really for other people to know, it's for us to know. And again, you know, we're going to find the people that want to be part of our circle. We're going to find the people that resonate with that. But there's a reason why Saul turned into Paul. There's a reason why Moses couldn't speak and had to have a good tribe around him for people to be able to speak for him and do all those things, right? So we never do and go through life in solitude, and we weren't made for that. I had to learn that the hard way. But no, I mean, you know, it is part of one of those things that, you know what, people are going to come in and out as we need them to. It's a lot of work to keep the people that you want to be surrounded with and to be a part of. But with that being said, like, you know, we're going to have people that come back and try to knock us down, or people who are jealous of the success, or who want to be in the results, you know, and not realize the hard work that had to go through that. And I think that social media is part of the problem in regards to that. But, you know, as you and I both know, social media is also a great tool that can fast forward marketing, that can keep you connected. So, you know, just like anything else, you know, you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons and leverage that.
And I think it's all the intent behind what you're using it for,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yep.
I face a lot of criticism right now, and I don't really give a damn. But you see my gym videos every damn morning.
Yep.
You know what, man? That's a two-pronged thing for me. Like, I know I'm not in the shape of freaking Lou Ferrigno, and I'm not trying to be.
Right.
But there's somebody that watches that video every morning that right now is 400 pounds, that threw on a vest for the first time and went for a walk because they saw me do it, and they see me get up and do it every day.
Yep.
And I get the comments across every platform I post on. You know, no muscle mass, wannabe bodybuilder, you know, all this stuff. It's like, you know what? Like, go do something with your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Put yourself out there.
Yeah, go do it. Yeah. Then come talk to me.
Right.
But right now, one, it holds me accountable to the people who I've trusted to hold me accountable when they see it every morning. And I've asked people to hold me accountable in that way. But again, it's going back to the people that reach out to me on, you know, I get a couple thousand views on some of the YouTube videos that I put every morning. And I've only been doing that for about a month. But people comment on there, man. Like, this is exactly what I needed to see today. The little clip, you know, the little snippet or blurb or quote that I put on there each morning. Like, every day it's someone, I needed to hear this today. I needed to see this today. Thank you for doing this.
Yep.
And that's what it's about, right? People can laugh at me all they want to, if they want to. They can make fun of me. They can talk crap about it. They can call me an addict. I don't belong here. You know, whatever you want to say. Someone's life is being changed because I'm stepping out and being bold and fighting through that.
100%. Our stories are not made for us, right? And you know, that's why you are in this position that you're at, right? Because you're needed. You're needed to help people go through whatever they're going through. And that's really kind of the motto and philosophy that I live by, right? Who can I serve today? Who can I influence for better? Or, you know, who can I maybe get them thinking? You know, so my background a lot of creative writing, poetry, things like that. And I had a poetry mentor. This guy was a 7-time world haiku champion. And he basically said, look, as a poet, our goal is not to influence change, but our goal is to influence the mind, to allow people to question things, to allow people to make sound decisions and not just be sheep, to be able to allow people to turn around and say, you know what, that is interesting. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And he went back and basically he was like, he's like, even if you break words down literally, he's like poetry, right? He goes, did not Jesus, not Gandhi, he's like, did they not do their teachings in front of different trees and sat there with their people, right? And he also said, like, what about in times when we had, kings and queens that were rulers, and they had jesters, and he's like, but the town crier, the person that would get people around to talk about all the things that we're going through, he said they were the ones really with the power because they were the ones talking directly to the people. He said, so how much propaganda was fed through them? How many wars were started? How many revolts were started through them because maybe something happened or because they didn't believe or something? And he's like, the power was always given to the people. He said, but for some reason in today's society, people don't realize that they have that. And so as business owners, as entrepreneurs, we kind of do our own revolting. We create our own opportunities, and we don't rely on other people to tell us. We go and seek those answers. And so a lot of those philosophies and all those things really are how we apply to what we do on a day-to-day basis.
I love that, man. I absolutely love that. Let me go a little deep if you don't mind, man, because you've mentioned the battle with depression and suicide attempts, and again, just another thing that you and I share, right? When I was coming out of my recovery, I get asked this all the time, like, how'd you do it after 10 years after 10 years of cocaine addiction and doing the worst of the worst things that I possibly could have imagined doing? Like, I get it all the time. How'd you do it? Well, there's no big glorious story. Like, I tried to kill myself and the Lord woke me up the next day, and I have not wanted to use drugs since that day.
Yeah.
Like, that's my story. What did that look like for you, man?
I think I've heard of so many different variations that people have gone through. Some people had that snap to moment. Some people have had near-death experiences. Some people saw the light. Some people saw these different things, right? And I think for me, I was so fed up with everything. I was so fed up with being mediocre. I was so fed up with, going paycheck to paycheck. I was so fed up. I actually thought about joining the military just so that way I could have some benefits. Like, I would go and serve, however long I needed, and just to have those things, right? But what I also found out was, like, I had a deeper purpose, right? And it wasn't the right reason to want to go serve. I have a huge respect for the military and for people that can answer that call. But for me to go into that, it was of the wrong mindset. And I know that they would have probably kicked me out, or I wouldn't have been able to qualify because of my mentality. Okay. But I think for me, it was just kind of one of those things where, like, I was so desperate for change. I was so desperate that I wanted to pull myself out of that, because I just kind of had a small glimpse, and I watched people that I knew who were working in the call center environment, and they were like in their 60s and in their 70s, and they're miserable. And I know that they're miserable because I was miserable. And so these people are sitting there, and like, again, I'm not disrespecting the industry. It's just that it was not for me. I envy in some ways a lot of people who can just go work a 9 to 5 and call it quits and go home and leave work at work, right? I'm just not built that way. But for me, I was just so tired because I was watching people get mentally exhausted. I was watching people go home, feel unfulfilled. Gosh, if I look back on it now, the idea of having to work to earn time off, the idea of having to go and work so many hours to be able to have a vacation day, to be able to go and work so many hours to be like, I need to take my kid to school and I have to make sure that it's approved. Like, to me, that is so mind-boggling, right? If I don't feel good, I just tell my team, hey, I don't feel good. You guys deal with it, right? If I say, look, I'm going on vacation, like, you guys run the office, like, it's freeing to be able to do that, right? And again, every situation is going to be different, so not everybody can just turn around and go and launch a business with their skill set today, right? But I truly believe that if you are willing to do that, you'll find a way. But for me, I think it was just I was so tired of thinking that I was going to live life this way, that I was going to live life mediocre, that I was going to be low middle class, that I was going to go paycheck to paycheck. But I also didn't have the right surroundings, right? So this book, Tribe Millionaire, we all kind of have heard the concept, you're the average sum of the 5 people you hang around.
Yep.
When you go a little bit further and understand that the concept of that expands and says that you probably are also of the similar income, similar mindset, similar mentality, that the 5 people you hang around, you probably know exactly what they do and what they're making or close to it. And so when you sit there and you realize, man, where am I spending my time and energies? Where am I spending my circles? Who am I hanging around? Right. And when I was going through a lot of this stuff, like I was hanging out with a lot of poets, which again, I love that because I was immersed in art. I was inspired. But a lot of these guys were starving artists. A lot of these guys weren't making it themselves. Nobody owned their house. Nobody, had a family. And it wasn't necessarily that I was looking for those things, but deep down it was like, man, now that I have those, I look back and I'm like, those are the things that were soul filling. And so a lot of it was kind of a crutch. A lot of it was to fill the time. And so as I started slowly introducing myself to new concepts, daring myself to go out and fail, working on things like independent film, getting into slam poetry and competitions, recording a song, doing acting for Spike TV, being on set for things like The Biggest Loser. Like you look at these things and you're like, wow, that's so cool that you did all those things. But a lot of it was to fill the time. But I also taught myself that there is so much more opportunity out there. Yeah. Even though it wasn't the right opportunity for what I wanted to do, to be able to cross it off and say, yeah, it's kind of cool that I did that. I at least understand now about the film industry. I understand what it takes to go in there, writing a script and reading a script, all the recording that goes into a music, into a podcast. So like all these things that were there, but it wasn't who I was. And so once I finally got a chance to start fulfilling who I was and understanding who I was, all of those things started going away. Do I think about and do I have suicide ideation? No. But is that ever truly going to go away like an addict? No, because I have insights. People are going to talk about it and I'm like, ooh, I'm kind of an expert on that topic a little bit if you want to go there, right? But nobody's like voluntarily saying, hey, so can you tell me about how you got through going through depression, unless you share their story? And it's not that I want to go and relive that, but I'm more than willing to have a conversation. But what was so important to me is that I realized, you know what, my goal in life, my purpose is to be able to help others and to serve others in whatever capacity. And so I think that not everybody is on that same path to be able to find that purpose, but I was so driven to basically get away from my past. And it's kind of a weird spot because if you focus so much on the rear view, you miss being in the moment, and you also can't see what's coming in the future. But if you spend so much time thinking about the future, then you kind of almost forget who you are, and then that authenticity piece goes away. And then there's also something about being able to pause in the moment, reflect a little bit, think about the future, but also still embrace what's happening in the now. So there's a lot of different elements that come into that. And again, it's so easy to get lost in any of those. And I think I had to experience all of those at different times to be able to get to this point where I can say, you know what, I know that I'm not going to find the balance, but I know how to recenter myself.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I thank you for the vulnerability and sharing that, and really just going so deep, man. I mean, I think something you said there at the end is it can apply to our spiritual journey. It can apply to our health. It can apply to our role as a spouse, parent, owner of a business. If you're an entrepreneur, employee, if you're just, you're fine going to work every day. Like, this is a journey.
Yeah.
As I was going through recovery and really helping people in their recovery journey, I would see people get discouraged because they couldn't have a problem fixed or every problem they were dealing with fixed in 7 days. right? And I used to tell them, like, guys, you need to slow down and understand that sanctification is a process. Growth is a process.
It sure is.
Right? Our health is a process.
Yeah.
The growth of our business is a massive undertaking, and something that I think, we see the huge stat of small businesses that fail. And I think that that's attributed to that, right? People really overestimate what they're going to do in a year and underestimate what could take 10 years or 20 years or whatever that looks like. And we don't just live in the day and do the things that we need to do today and recognize the progress of today.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. And also remember, like, self-sabotage and your detriment of yourself also takes time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like that you just go in and you fail one time and people are like, oh, it's over for you. No, you have to continuously mess up, right? Because people genuinely want to see you succeed. The people who care about you and are surrounded by you, they want to do good things and good things to happen to you. So you have to continuously, over and over again, showcase that you're not worth it or that you're not doing something worthy for people to give up on you. And I know that because in the coaching realm, I spent so much time trying to help people who won't help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to basically learn to be able to let that go. Because as much as I want to help everyone, as much as I want to see everyone that I care about and people that I know succeed, the unfortunate thing is that not everybody is going to be able to benefit from what I offer. And they have to kind of go through their own journey and their own path to be able to get there. But it is the hardest thing to basically care so much and want people to do so well and realize that they have to go on their own journey and that they have a long ways to go.
100%, man. And a book that's really impactful back here on my shelf is called The Gap in the Gain. I don't know if you've read that one yet.
I have. Yes. It's such a good book.
It is. And I think probably I had adopted this mindset already before I read the book, but I think that is so incredibly important as we're on these journeys of life, of having those moments to pause and looking at things in the way of, look how far I've come to this point, rather than look how far I still have to go. Yeah. Like, I'm a completely different person today than I was 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced massive growth. But if I look at that in comparison to where my end goal is, that end goal is still a hell of a lot further than where I am now.
Yes.
But man, am I 10 times the business owner today than I was a year ago.
Yeah. It's right? A marathon, not a sprint.
My health journey, I've got, ideally I'd like to be down another 30 pounds of weight, but I'm 40 pounds lighter than I was last year.
Mm-hmm.
And my body's completely different and I feel different every single day. But in the past, I've looked at that and I hit these weeks of plateau where I'm not losing any weight. And then I get discouraged and then I drive down to crumble cookies because it's pointless now, right? I may as well go eat 2,500 calories of cookies and just throw in the towel because I'm not seeing any progress.
It's okay though, right? Because, like, sometimes we got to have a step back to be able to pause in that moment. Sometimes, it's like a fighter, it is virtually impossible to go undefeated for an entire career, right? It was maybe able to in the past because, but again, everybody now is like a freak of nature in terms of their size or, in terms of, we're so much more aware. You got kids who are training to be professional athletes at 7 years old now, right? I mean, it's a whole different game. And so while, our coaches, our mentors, ourselves, we demand excellence in all these things, at some point, you also have to let kids be kids. You have to let the version of you be authentically you. And, so yeah, you can generally work on your health and work on eating better, working out, but you don't have to go and deprive yourself, to turn around and say, you know what, hey, I had some crumble cookies yesterday. As long as I'm not eating them every day, all day long, and again, I know, like, I like crumbles, so I could go in there and I could destroy some cookies, man. The fact that you brought that up is kind of like hurts my feelings that we're not eating some cookies right now. No, but in all seriousness, though, like, give yourself some grace, because while we are our harshest critics, the one person that can forgive you and is willing to give you grace is yourself. And if you don't have that, then you live unbalanced, right? And so you have to be able to, like I said, be able to center yourself, be able to realize when you're tipping too far one way or the other. But no, I mean, all these things that kind of keep circling back. What I'm hearing is just like, man, so many of us grew up in a time frame where we were unbalanced. How many of us, as young men, were told, boys don't cry, and women on the opposite spectrum, hey, be a lady, you don't show anger. And so how many of us grew up with that imbalance piece? So you think about that and you come back to today's world and you're like, no wonder why we don't resonate with the younger generations who are trying to push change and talk about mental health and all those things, because it's a foreign concept to us, at least from the way that we grew up.
Dude, that is such a deep topic right there. And so I grew up with a military dad. My dad was a recon sniper in the Marine Special Forces.
Oh, man.
So I grew up with, you don't tarnish the name of this family. You don't show weakness. You suck it up.
Mm-hmm.
He used to, I'm not going to use the saying he used to say, but we'd get hurt or scrape ourselves or something. And he'd say, I'd had worse on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I think there was an eye-opening moment a few years into my recovery, because me and my dad ended up having a rocky relationship, as you can imagine, with him. We were good all the way through up when it was finally discovered that I was using drugs, which was, I think I was already 18 at the time when it started, but they found out because I had stolen a bunch of money from them, and they didn't know about it. But when he found out, no word said, ran up and punched me in the face, and then we didn't talk for like 3 years.
Oh.
And I put on this facade that I was good for a while and our relationship would be okay, and then I'd do something stupid again, and then we wouldn't talk for a long time, and just a big cycle there. But when I finally got sober, and he didn't know, still really didn't know all the ups and downs I had been going through. But when I went and sat and talked with him and said, Dad, this is what the last 10 years has looked like. This is everything I've done. I'm sorry. I love you. It was kind of one of those moments that was like, eye-opening for both of us a little bit, because he said, he was, well, I've always been there for you. Why didn't you come talk to me about it? Why didn't you tell me you were struggling?
Yeah.
And I had to tell him flat out, because you told me not to. You told me we don't show weakness. We bury our problems and we move along. And that was such a breakthrough moment for both me and him. But I think that I say all that to say, to the men listening to this, there is so much power in vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Not only in helping you release your vices, but for the people around you to know that you've been struggling, and to not use it as an excuse for your poor behavior, if it's been there, or you not living up to your potential, or you being an asshole of a husband or father or whatever it is, but to allow you some grace and to start working towards forgiveness.
I love that. Let me share this story for you here. And this is, I don't know if I've ever shared this story in depth here, but my sister was somebody where when she was younger, she got thrown out of a car from a car accident. The person that she was with was underage drinking. My sister didn't know. They used to have like these club days. It was crazy to me when you think about that. They would allow like 13, 14, 50-year-olds in this club where they could serve alcohol. Anyhow, the whole car flipped multiple times. My sister and another girl got thrown out. The two in the front seat ended up okay. But something kind of changed within my sister. I mean, she was half paralyzed, so the left side of her body she couldn't really use. She had a stroke from the accident, so she was in a coma for about a week. And I think I was about 15 or 16 at the time. And my sister and I were really close. We were 2 years apart. But she went from basically kind of like, hey, this is an eye opener, to then basically just kind of feeling like she was not good enough, right? And so she was always looking for kind of love in the wrong places. A lot of the decisions she made were questionable. And again, like, it just became really hard to basically to stay connected and still, like, it just hurt too bad to care for her that much, right, as a brother. And so at one point I did actually have to cut her off to basically say, look, I can't have my family get close to you in this capacity, because I don't want them to feel the pain that I feel every time that they see you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't want them to experience, oh, what happened to my aunt if something ever happened to her. Now I was there every time that she needed help. If she needed something, I'd go and I'd buy her groceries. I'd pick her up, from random spots and take her home, so I feel at peace with everything. But on my son's first birthday party, actually the same day, I got a phone call from my father. My sister had passed away, and she had basically gotten kicked out of her apartment. Apparently went to go get the rest of her stuff and left her daughter with one of the tenants in this apartment complex. And so for like a day and a half, we had no idea where my niece was. And I remember like the news channels kind of tearing up the family because we put, something on the news to be able to find her. Well, the people who were watching her had no idea that she had passed. They'd been calling her phone, and they had no idea that she passed. And then by the time that they saw the news, they brought her into the police station, all these things. But I remember the news kind of tearing everything up, be like, oh, she didn't want the family to know where she was at. And it wasn't that. It's just basically she had this nomadic lifestyle because she didn't want to basically live with my father and respect kind of general rules of, hey, you have a daughter. I don't want you out at 2:00 in the morning, or, I don't want to be responsible for, watching your daughter all the time, all these different things. And so, but as a guy in today's world, we get kind of crucified for not doing what society wants us and expects us to be. And I get it. Like, there's been a lot of breakthrough for women over the last, 100 years, as it should be. But also at the same time, it's like we get crucified because we're not, living up to everyone else's expectations. You have one end where people are like, I want a man who goes and works and provides for me, right? I want this manly man. But then they turn around and you have a whole other side of women who are like, well, I don't want a guy at all because I got beat. I got, all these things. And like, my man is unemotionally unattached and unavailable. So there's so much stigma and so many different conflicting messages that because of that imbalance that we had growing up, right?
Yeah.
But I share that story of my sister because I think it's okay as men for us to realize that we can cut off those toxic relationships, But again, I'm at peace with everything because I showed up for my sister when she needed me. I just didn't allow her for my family to have that image of her. So when I talk about my sister, I don't badmouth all the things that she went through, because at the end of the day, I still very much care for her. But the memory of my kids in her, because they didn't get a chance to know her, they think she's a little goofball. Those are the good memories that I can take with me. Yeah. And so a lot of times, especially as guys, we stick and stay in relationships. Men oftentimes are the ones who are most verbally abused, but it goes against the stigma to turn around and say, well, yeah, I let my wife boss me around. But that isn't a form of an abuse. But a guy's never going to go and say, oh, well, I got punched in the face by my wife. Well, why not? Right? Because it's tougher for you to stick around and deal with it versus actually go and make change and let people know that it's okay and that you can break away from that toxicity.
I love that, man. I love where this conversation has gone. I love people like yourself that are willing to just come on and talk about real things in life without I hope you guys hear the tone in our voice. Like we don't say these things with any amount of shame or conviction or condemnation or anything at all. Like
No, not at all.
we have victory in this, man, and we celebrate it. Like I'm gonna be 9 years sober this year.
Oh man, congrats. That's
You know,
awesome.
that's a hell of a thing to celebrate. And you know, God saved me from that, and I'm grateful for it every day. And you know, it's a tough conversation to have, but my wife and I still revisit it sometimes because, you know, only by His grace alone, we're still married.
Hmm.
You know, when I tried to kill myself and things were going down that way, we were planning on getting divorced. We were actually separated.
Wow.
And through my recovery process, we were able to rebuild our marriage and continue. And we were remarried. I think it was 3 years into my sobriety. We went and renewed our vows, and his, you know, just incredible blessing there. But we halfway joke about it sometimes, but still I take it very seriously, man. Like if I had to walk through all that again to get to where I am today, I do it.
Yeah.
As crazy as that might sound, if that was the only way for me to get to where I am today, I'd gladly do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my plan, right? Like I had scholarships to go play college baseball.
Mm.
That was my dream. I played baseball from the time I could pick up a bat to all through high school. I gave up every other sport and I played baseball 10 months out of the year. Like
Wow.
baseball was my life.
Yeah.
And that was what I thought I was going to do. And there was a moment, probably a year or so, maybe 2 years before I got sober, probably 2 years before I got sober. I was in a Dollar General. It's funny. I listened to this on another podcast this morning, somebody with a similar story, but I was doing store remodels at the time, running reset crews. And I was in getting dirty one day myself, and I went and picked up a bottle of laundry detergent, and it just like leaked all over me, and I'm covered in disgusting laundry detergent. I'm dirty, I'm pissed off, and I'm yelling at God, like verbally, but also just mostly mentally yelling, but I'm talking out loud too. And I was, you know, 6 years into addiction at this point, something like that. I think I was high the day I was in there. And I'm wrestling with God, man. Like, what in the hell are we doing here? Like, this isn't what the plan was. Why am I a coke addict covered in gross laundry detergent right now with negative $47 in the bank? Like, why did you allow this to happen? And I froze. And it was the first time I can remember audibly hearing God talk to me. And I wasn't even like practicing and living my faith at this point. Like I've always believed God existed, you know, and I was kind of fake attending church at that point, trying to show my wife that I was trying to be better. I wasn't really. I'd leave church and go buy Coke. But the first time I audibly heard him talk to me was that moment. I froze and I heard him say, because I have bigger plans for you than you had for yourself. And I broke down and started crying like a baby right there in the aisle of that damn store in the middle of the day. I had people coming up to me from every direction, asking me if I was okay, and like just looked like I was having a complete breakdown. And it would still be, I mean, just thinking of timelines 2 to 3 years down the road before I got sober. Right. But it just goes back to the fact, like, yeah, I didn't get to go play baseball. That was my plan. It wasn't God's. And he allowed me to walk through all of that pain and darkness and just miserable life that I was in. You know, I was in literal hell for 10 years. To come out the other side of it, to let people know that there's another way. That rock bottom you're feeling right now isn't where you have to stay.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Dude, I just want to say I'm so proud of you, like who you've become and where you've come from. Like it is so liberating to know that people like can literally do 180s, right? Did I ever share with you like my potato story?
Uh-uh.
So at my low point, I was going through like a really, really nasty divorce. And we had just got done finishing having my wages garnished from leaving an apartment complex and moving back. And then my ex decides that she's going to leave, but also leave me in the house because my name was on the lease. And she worked at a restaurant at that time, so none of her um, pay was basically recorded, right? Because she's paid in tips. And so what I was literally bouncing checks to keep the lights on, but I would go and buy bags of potatoes to ration them. That was basically what I would eat because I would still have my oldest son with me a couple of days throughout the week. I took him to school every morning. I'd pick him up 3 or 4 days out of the week, and then I had him on the weekends. So that was my thing is I'd go to work, I'd go to school, I'd go to my second job, and then in between I'd figure out how to get him to and from school. But I literally like had to buy these bags of potatoes so that way I would have food. So anything that you can think of, any sort of condiment, like I would, if we went to McDonald's, like for my son, I would grab as much ketchup as I could, the to-go packets. So that way I would have something to throw on these things. And you think of like the worst combinations you can think of, I've had it. Mayonnaise, mustard, Italian dressing, ranch dressing, I couldn't afford like bacon, so I put like, lunch meat on there, spam, um, like anything I could to be able to do that. And I would basically ration those for a month at a time because I didn't know if I was going to have gas money. I didn't know if I was going to, do all these things. I went without internet for 3 years. I didn't have, like I didn't have a mattress to sleep on, like all these different things. And so, um, but it's so weird that even today, every time that we go out somewhere to eat, and if there's like a loaded baked potato option, that's like, my wife's like, aren't you sick of potatoes? And like, part of me kind of like, sometimes I am, but I like, it's a reminder to myself of where I've come from. Right. But it's also now like a luxury that I can actually have somebody else make that potato for me. And it's a constant reminder of like where I've been, but also, where I'm at, but also where I'm going. Right. And so it's so crazy when I think about that. Cause my wife's like, it's so crazy that you still will eat a potato after all of that stuff. And I said, it's one of those things that's going to fuel me to keep going. It's going to be one of those things that's a constant reminder of, uh, you know, of my faith, of what allowed me to get to where I'm at. Um, but yeah, like it's so crazy because I look back and like, I will never intentionally go out of my way to like buy a bag of potatoes now because I used to do it so often. But if it's on there as an option, I'm like, I'm gonna order it. It's so weird.
Oh, dude, I love that story, man. And I think that's probably a good place for us to end this.
Yeah,
And
I appreciate the time, man. This is it's been
I
fun.
I love where this conversation went, and I think it's going to change lives. I think it was an appropriate conversation for honestly the first conversation with this relaunch of the podcast and the direction that's going to go. And I just want to use this message as an encouragement because I think that God brought this conversation up for a reason and the way that it went and brought you and I together for a reason. And people that are struggling with something deep and dark right now are going to hear this. I'm going to start crying a little bit, but I just need you guys, if you're listening to this right now and you've heard mine and Patrick's journey, know that there's light on the other side of the struggle that you're on, and you're going through it now to help people where you are right now get through it as well.
God's not done with you yet.
He's not done with you yet. Not even close. And even when you get through this, there's going to be more struggles as you move forward. They're going to look different. You may not fall into the same struggle, but you're going to face struggle the rest of your life. But if you can keep in the forefront of your view that the struggle you face is just building on your testimony and your ability to turn around and help others recover and come out of that struggle as well, those struggles get easier and easier to deal with. So, Patrick, dude, I appreciate you. How can people get in touch with you, get connected with you, and follow your journey, brother?
Yeah, I'm on most social platforms, but Facebook and LinkedIn are really kind of the ones I spend the most time on. Built all of my businesses strictly through social media. Kind of what got me into a lot of these insurance groups and on these podcasts was because I built an insurance agency off of $260. So willing to give anybody time who wants to better themselves. That has always been my promise, and that will always be the promise that I deliver on. So Facebook, LinkedIn are kind of the best options. But if you have other platforms, you can probably find me on there. Thank you for the time, Kody. I mean, man, you serve so many other people, and if there's anything that I can do for you, that I'm always available for you.
Hey, same here, brother. Same here, and this was it, man. This is gonna reach and help a lot of people, and I appreciate you, man. We'll have to get back on the calendar to do a business talk because, my God, as much as you have to offer on the personal side, you are a wealth of knowledge on the business side too. So
I appreciate
we'll get back on it and do that.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, my man. Hey, thank you everyone for joining us on this episode. You can go follow us on social media, Instagram, Unleashed AF, Facebook, Unleashed with Kody Houk, and go follow my personal YouTube channel at Kody Houk. But Patrick, thanks again, man. And thank you all.
See you guys.